So I'm talking today to Cindy. Cindy, thank you so much for being on the Cindy Group podcast with me.
Of course, I'm so happy to be here.
So let's dive right in, right? Like we're going to talk today about how to find your voice in unruly times, how to like really remind yourself of your own voice. So tell me, I always think of like, okay, if I have to find my voice, I mean, I've been there, but that means I've lost it. And how did you lose your voice? What happened?
Well, the very short answer is I, at the same time that I was losing my desire to be in theater. So I have been in theater since I was 5 and studied it in college and went to New York and then LA. And I was a theater director and writer. And then I got sick of doing theater for mostly empty houses. So I switched to marketing.
To fill the houses.
I was doing it anyway. So I had to do it for my own shows. So I figured I might as well get paid for it. And
that sounds reasonable.
Yeah, it worked really well for a little while. It was right when social media was happening. So that'll age me. But
benefit of the doubt, like just roll with it and no one knows what they're doing anyway. And like it's always like with social media, it's always good to be the first. So you just go and experiment and have fun.
Yeah, it was fun. You know, we talk about finding my voice, but I was helping other people find, their voice in social media. And then after a few years of that and realizing I really didn't want to do theater anymore, although I still loved it. Surprise, we got pregnant. Yeah, like we've been married 7 years. It was like maybe, but we don't know how it will fit in with our life now. And
a lot of uncertainties like with that.
Yeah. And we were just lucky that at that same time, because we'd been shifting back and forth between who had the full-time job and who had the freelance job. And at that time, my husband was shifting from theater to theme parks, which is where he wanted to go. So he was happy and working full-time. And we just kind of embraced becoming parents with the same way we embraced most things, which was, well, we did it. Let's really do it.
We'll figure it out.
Yeah.
We'll figure it out along the way. But yeah, I mean, that's the thing, right? Like, I mean, with parenthood, most people kind of like agree, or it's kind of like common. There is no rule book, right? There is no guidebook or rule book, but guidebook. Well, no, really, right? It's not applicable one to one. And in business, we're like buying all the guidebooks there are with hope that one fits us. Whereas just like taking it as it is, maybe there's some nugget in there, but you just have to like figure it out for yourself, learn by doing. Like
and I read all the good books on parenting and on giving birth specifically, and I kind of took I took a lot of how I learned how to direct theater, which was like you learn all of the techniques, you learn all the background and your history, and you read the books and you study, and then you go in rehearsal and like
research rehearsal.
Then you have people and you just have to remember your story. So we approach parenting in a lot of that same way, where we did a lot of research and did our work for it. But then once we were in it, my husband used to joke that our parenting style was like Crush in Finding Nemo, where you like give the kid everything they can learn and do and everything you can give, but at some point they just like go off in the ocean by themselves. So that was a really fun way to look at it. And I was also 35 when I gave birth, so right on that, like, oh, now you're a senior mother or whatever they call us.
Yeah. No, that been there, done that. Yeah.
But it was a really good time. It was really good timing for me, both in my freelance work and his job. And then about a year into my son's life, he got offered a job to move to Orlando for a couple of years to work on this project that would take us to China.
Ooh, yeah.
And we were LA people. Like we our going away party was like 100 people in our small backyard throughout the entire day. There was always like 75 to 100 people, and like we
Yeah, like deeply
love.
rooted within the community.
Yeah, and when I
Mm.
became a mom, it wasn't a huge transition because I had friends that had already done it or were doing it right
Yeah,
along with
that's the
me.
joy of being like a senior mom. Most of your friends already had the kid.
Exactly. I could be like, tell me what unmedicated birth
Yeah.
is like.
Do you still
Okay.
have baby clothes?
No, no, I was actually really happy when we decided like that was part of the moving experience too. I had to
Yeah.
cull. So I still have blankets. I still have some
Yeah.
baby
Yeah, but I
clothes.
was also like always asking my friends, like, can I have your like old baby clothes and stuff? Because
Oh
they
yeah.
had kids like 1, 2, or 3 years before prior to me. So I was like, perfect timing. Just
Yeah, I love
repurpose.
seeing some of my favorite baby clothes on my friends' kids. Like it worked
Yeah,
out really
it's quite
well.
nice that way. Yeah, so those are the perks of a senior mom, air quotes.
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
also, because I was freelancing and um I made a thing out of being pregnant and working still. Like I was so happy to be able to work in places. I'm still working in theater and education, but like being pregnant and then becoming a mom, I could take my baby everywhere.
Mm.
Um, Super lucky. He was a really good baby.
Yeah,
So
it
like
doesn't work with all the babies, but yeah.
wouldn't have worked with my second. But like I was reviewing shows at the Hollywood Fringe Festival and like nursing him in the back row. And as long as he did it, like I did take him to a drama, but
Yeah.
like as long as he wasn't acting up, people didn't were like happy. Were like really
Yeah.
excited about it. So it was nice to like be in that position of like, oh,
Yeah.
this could work. This is great.
Yeah, and blended really in. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
that sounds nice.
he
Yeah.
becoming a mom in Los Angeles became like an extension of my personality and work up
Oh,
until
yeah.
then.
Yeah, I
Um,
like that. Yeah.
and then we moved.
And then what? So you first moved to from LA to Florida, right? How long did you
Yeah,
stay in Orlando then? Like, was it just
well,
to kind of like transition to China or?
that's what we thought. Like that's what we were
Okay.
planning on. We thought it was, and that this was by far the hardest move, I think. Um, it was. We thought we were going to be there for like a year and a half, and then
Mm,
move to China. So we bought a house. Luckily, that was part of the deal is that we could versus
mm,
in Los Angeles. Um, but I never really tried to like make it our own, and we were still
mm.
low on
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I
money.
get that. It's always kind of like the in-between place. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was my first house, so I didn't know really how to do it very well,
Mm,
um, and then I remember really, and we always felt in transition. We always
mm.
felt like this was
Exactly.
a.
Then you're also like, why putting up the energy to
Mhm.
really make it your own if you know you're probably gonna like resell or whatever in a year's time anyway.
Yeah, and it just felt like a really long layover,
Mm.
which is not a good way to look at living life. Um,
Yeah, it probably puts, I can imagine it puts you in a weird headspace to feel like, okay, it's kind of like a pause, but at the same time, it is not like everything
mhm.
keeps on moving, but you're feeling like you're paused. Or
Yeah,
how
and
was it for you?
we also, one reason we thought it would be a good situation is that we once we had our first kid, we knew we wanted two, and this was a good timing to like have kids 2.5 years apart, still
Mm.
born in the United States. We didn't have to deal
Hmm.
with any of that, but then we get to go on this adventure.
Hmm.
Um, but we were caught in Orlando between like Los Angeles, which was like, this was a great life. Why did we leave it? And China, which is like, this could be awesome. It could also really suck. Like, we don't know. We're just taking a risk, right?
Yeah.
And I was having so much trouble making friends. And the people we knew there were all through theme parks. And
Okay, so you're like through your husband's work. So there were not like your circle, your core community.
Yeah, and I was always, even with someone who I'm very close to now, I was always feeling like it, you know, when you're at a work event and you're like, okay, I'm not going to drink too much. I'm going to like be careful what I say.
My good behavior.
Yeah, it felt like that, except I had a toddler.
But you're still then like putting on the act. Like it's even worse, right? You're putting up the act of like the perfect spouse, whatever that means, the perfect mom, and like trying to have your kid in check because you don't want to cause any kind of mayhem at a corporate event. Ooh, yeah.
And like I remember very clearly feeling like I was dating again, except I was really bad at it this time. And like I would be like, is this the time that I ask for their number? Like, how do I know? Like, if we're having such a good time together, what do I do? And I made some really like awkward mistakes.
Which was the most awkward one? Tell me.
It was really like this woman who was so sweet. She was from Germany. No, she wasn't from Germany, I'm sorry, but she was from Europe, and she was just so cool. And she had kids like just a little older than mine, and they got at this time I still only had one. My son got along with her kids really well, like just clicked because he's kind of feral, and it was just fun. And it felt really good. And I was like, hey, you know, this was really fun. Do you mind if I give you my number? We can hang out. And she was kind of like, sure.
Okay. And yeah.
We made plans, and I think we hung out maybe once, but she just kind of kept blowing me off. And I was like, okay, that was bad. That didn't work.
Yeah, but that was just like, I mean, sometimes it's just bad luck, but I mean, at least you gave her a number, right? Like, I mean, I remember I have this weird thing, like I still have, like, I'm lucky that most of my close friends have kids themselves, so we're just like hanging around in the same circles. We just have now kids in tow. But so I haven't really made, maybe that changes when you get to the kindergarten, but I haven't made new friends like through my kid, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I don't know. And sometimes I feel so silly. I'm on the playground, right? And like, then you eventually end up chatting to someone, but I never give my number, even though one or two cases I was like, that person actually seemed pretty cool. I should have given her my number. Why haven't I? Like, I was like, what? And the other times, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I was like, oh, I don't want to have like be our kid to be like the only thing we have in common.
Yeah.
It's also weird, but
like there was one person I met who's still a really good friend, and we met in an indoor playground. We were talking about being expats because she had moved here from Germany. And at the end of it, she was just like, hey, here's my number. And that was like the easiest friend I've ever had. When we went to Oktoberfest a couple of years ago, we like drove by her house to, you know, we all got to meet the younger kids, and she was just so like, got it. We're connected. We both just moved here. We should hang out. But then it wasn't until like I figured out that Orlando was really a small town in a lot of ways, because I'd lived in like Boston, New York, and Los Angeles. So like the fact that people were recognizing me from other places, I was like, what?
Wait, what's happening? Whoa. Yeah. So this is completely different here, where you go about and you're like, hey, like this is Finn, your kid, right? And you're like, holy crapper, like how do you like, wait, what's
even now, like when I meet people and I don't recognize them, I look at their kid, I'm like, oh yeah, okay, yeah. But then like if you went to the story time at the library on Friday mornings, and they
Mm.
have a beautiful library system here, I realized that all those, like most of the families that went there then took their kids to the lake and playground within walking distance.
Mm.
So I didn't have
Mhm.
to make friends. I didn't have to try to make a play date. They just was this natural progression that we
Mm.
did for like 4 years.
Yes,
And
nice.
then I joined a mom's group that I met on Meetup, and they scheduled all the play dates, and I didn't have to make friends with everybody. I just had to like,
Show up,
yeah.
basically. Yeah.
And I've met some really good friends through it, but like most people were just parent acquaintances
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm.
like each other enough to give advice, but like we don't have to even have the same political beliefs. We don't talk about it. We just talk
Yeah.
about school.
Yeah. I like that, parenting acquaintances. Yes, I like that
Yeah.
word. Yeah.
But it really struck me like how weird I was. Excuse me. How weird I felt in Orlando, because like I went on this Hike It Baby meetup, which was really cool. The woman who ran it, I could just tell that she was like a good person. She was really open, really welcoming.
Mm-mm.
And like I mentioned that I worked from home and did some marketing, and she, about 20 minutes into the walk, was like, so Cindy, what do you do? Like what kind of marketing do you do? And I like froze, and because I was like, making sure that my kid wasn't eating peanut butter near the person I found out was like allergic, and like what a mom faux pas, and you know, are they cool with everybody going in the stream? Because sometimes
Yeah.
people aren't. And I also like, she was the first person in Orlando who learned I worked from home
Yeah.
and didn't assume I was in a multi-level marketing scheme. And we, and did it like cared about what I was doing, like she knows marketing.
Yeah. And
And
that completely like made you freeze.
I had no idea what to say. I like mumbled some stupid marketing jumbo.
Buzzwords. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah. Conversion rate. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah. Leads,
blah.
hot leads.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she kind of like, okay, like she kind of got it. And we're actually like, she's one of those great friends that no matter what happens, we're like, hey, we should hang out.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, that was a really, really big point for me to realize that I had no idea what I was doing in Orlando. And
Yeah. Yeah, yeah,
um,
yeah. I mean, even yeah, like imagine that if you freeze, if someone asks you from the outside, like a rather simple question, well, what actually is it that you do?
mhm.
Right? And you're like, wait, what? And you have all these things then going on in your head after the freeze. Yeah. That
And
would
it
have been
wouldn't have happened like that in Los Angeles, because I knew what I was doing, right? Even if I was
mm,
transitioning, I was transitioning from theater directing to
yeah,
marketing. I knew what I was saying and what I wanted to do.
yeah.
And but I was also like you were saying, it was this pause. It was this weird time because we were trying to get pregnant. Um, and of course the second one was a little harder than the first, which was just weird. But
Yeah, and I mean you're a new mom as well, right? Like, or and your husband was a new dad, so there are a lot of like, I remember like it was a lot to digest, how yourself and to that attached is your voice
mhm,
is changing, some because of some internal changes you go through, which is natural, and others are kind of like outside imposed
mhm.
ideas of motherhood that are or trying to reshape your sense of self and your voice accordingly.
Yeah, and like and what I found, and I know it's not this simple, but like I found in Orlando, it was that you're usually in the stay-at-home mom or like working mom circles, you were either doing that because you were going to be homeschooling, at least in the circles I found with all the events and everything, either because you wanted to bring your kids up way more religiously than you could in a school,
Okay.
or you were extremely like, for lack of a better term, hippie granola, woo, whatever. And I was like closer to that, but like not that.
Yeah.
and so there was, there were just very few
It just
people
wasn't, there wasn't a niche where you were like, this is where I feel like totally at ease and comfortable.
Yeah, and like when my husband had such a hard time because we also shared a car, which I don't suggest to anybody in this situation. So he was only going to work and home. And the only time we really went out is because I suggested it, or like I knew where to go because I had more time, and I actually like
he was
visited
completely
places.
he's only seen like the way to work, the commute, and like the office and the canteen. So how long did you end up staying in Orlando for before you left for China?
We were there for 4 years. And by the time we left, I mean, I still had 2 small kids, but my older son had been in school for a couple of years, and my younger son had been in like a co-op situation for a few months. So we had found a little bit of time for me to like figure out what I wanted to do. And I'd been working and I had been freelancing still since we moved there, for people I knew back in LA. And that worked out pretty well, although I was underpaying myself because I didn't believe that I would have the time to focus on it. And
so to focus on it in the sense of like that you thought you will not be able to provide the best work you could do.
Yeah, and that was mostly my own issue. Like my husband has been completely supportive. Like he knew that me being essentially the housewife is not what either one of us wanted. And long term was not going to work. Human resources called me the trailing spouse, which is just like the worst term ever. I felt like I was like hanging on to like a kite string or something. Like it was ridiculous. And I was still doing marketing, but I just wasn't happy with it. I tried finding a job here. I wasn't happy with it. And then once the kids were, I at least had a few hours every day to myself. It gave me a little bit of time to just say, okay, I don't want to do marketing anymore. And quite frankly, there are people 20 years younger than me who studied digital marketing in college, and like, of course they're going to get the jobs. I had been working with this author on her social media presence, and she introduced me to some private Facebook groups of working writers. And I used that time to really study a lot on how to be a professional writer, and like how to work with editors and pitching and like all this stuff. And
but this where your strategy comes back in. First, do the research.
Yes, exactly. And I had been writing a bit in Los Angeles, and I started writing for like
as a marketer, most marketers are good writers because that's your tool, or photography or videography, right? But if you do marketing and you really suck at writing, might be hard.
Exactly. It's writing in different word counts and for different audiences. And I had some very patient editors at the beginning, and then I got some really great jobs, a great like constant job through a friend of mine who has a marketing firm. And the summer before we moved, I took on another job that I shouldn't have taken on, and I
How come?
lost. Hmm?
How come?
It was a theater marketing job, and it's a theater I love. I'm actually on their board of directors now, but like it was too much for me to do during the summer when we couldn't afford summer camp the whole time, like barely at all.
Mm.
I still had, a baby, and he was more challenging. Um, and we were also like, we were going to move anywhere between 6 and 12 months.
Yeah.
And I just didn't, I was putting so much work into that and not maintaining my constant jobs, my anchor client.
Mm.
Um,
I'm wondering if it's also like, I mean, you kind of wrapped up theater marketing and you focused on writing, and then this great job comes along, right? Like where you're like, on paper, sounds amazing, blah 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 blah, hits all the buckets. At the same time, you probably, I'm just going on a limb, your intuition told
yeah,
you no 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 no. And how was that to like be at something again, working for a chapter again that you've closed, and you've started writing your next chapter, and you're like, no, no, let me go back to the previous chapter and like write some more.
yeah. I mean, my husband asked me the same thing.
I like your husband. We
No,
should
he's
invite him
great.
too.
Oh man, oh he's great. He has part of the reason that I married him was that he always made me. We always make each other question our choices, even if we agree with them. And man, he's been very
It's
helpful.
brutal. Yeah, it's brutal at times, I suppose, but yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
much better. And I I mean, part of it was that one of my best friends from college, and someone who I love was part of the leadership on it. Part of it
Yeah.
was that I really felt like I could bring something that they'd never had before.
Yes.
And
I
part of
mean,
it was
no,
that
yeah, I mean, yeah, absolutely agreeing, right? Like, I mean, there probably were a lot of like good reasons to do it. And
but
yet, now looking
yeah,
back, you said, oh no, I should not have done that.
yep, yep. And what happened is I lost that anchor client, and
Oh,
I
mm-hmm.
really messed up. I really messed up. And what that made me do was step back and say, how is it that my husband is giving me all of Sunday to work?
Mm.
I have certain times during the day I can work.
Mm.
This was a very consistent deadline. Like it wasn't like the anchor job like threw
Mm.
something at me. It was
Mm.
something very consistent. And
You knew in advance this is coming up. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And it was like a major thing. Like I was supposed to write a blog about like Frank Lloyd Wright, and it was for a realtor.
Mm.
So it was kind of their thing. And I took a month or two, again, very happy that I had the ability to do that, to look at why I stepped back into theater when I shouldn't really have, why I messed up on my timing,
Mm.
my
What was
time.
your
And
conclusion?
part of it was that I was two things.
Mm.
One is I was completely the chauffeur, and that was just driving me crazy, and I wasn't making use of the
Mm.
car time.
Mm.
I was letting it be Baby Shark and not what anything I wanted to listen
Mm.
to. And the other part is that I was completely underestimating, kind of on purpose, how long something would take me to do.
Mm.
So I did this and completely, like I went back to like stage manager days, like I did spreadsheets, I figured things out, and I said, okay, here's how long it takes. Because I had one other job at a theater, but it was
Mm.
it was a theater I knew very well. They had a lot of support. It was great. And it was in LA. So doing communications and marketing for across the country was fascinating. But I broke it down and I'm like, I do the newsletter, I do their social media. I make connections. Like I took every single thing that I do, including like answer random emails, you know, trying to shift gears. And I said, here's how much time it should take, including waiting time. Like,
yeah, I mean,
know,
yeah, exactly. Yeah, sometimes that takes up a lot of time.
Yeah. And then, I figured out like, you know, when I write a new article, how much time do I research? How much time do I write this and that? And then I looked at my calendar and I slotted, I highlighted when I had time to myself and when I had the kids with me and when I absolutely couldn't work. And I'm like, oh, well, that's the problem. There's not enough time. Shocker. And but just seeing it like that made it so easy and so much easier for me to say, like, I need 4 more hours this week. What can we do?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, right. Like, I mean, sometimes really depending on especially if you're like a math person and you need the percentages, or if you're a visual person and you have colored post-its of of chunks of time to really map it out and be brutally honest. I mean, the same goes for your budget, right? Like, I mean, to really be brutally honest and say, this is where we're at. Like, this is how much time I have. This is how much savings I have, whatever. And be like, okay, this is the status quo, and this is where I want to go, where I want to be. 4 more hours.
Yeah, and I figured out, like, you know, so if I needed 4 more hours, excuse me, I couldn't stay home to do it if my child was with me. And I went to I went to the library where he could play something. I went to pre-COVID indoor playgrounds, so much at one of these playgrounds that they created a little office area in the middle of the playground for me because they saw I was having trouble. Yeah. And I made my car time professional development time, which I hadn't been doing before. And so that just like helps motivate me. And I had less like on-ramp time when I had to work. It's like, oh, okay, well then if I have 2 hours when he naps, which was lucky, I didn't spend half an hour just kind of getting in the mood to do whatever.
That's the problem, right? Like if you need ramp up time, it cuts into your time chunk of time. Like,
and I started like sharing this information with people and like how to basically be a work at home parent, and people were really interested. And I started writing more about it and like running workshops on it. And I started, and this is like right before we moved. So we knew that I wasn't going to be able to make money right before we moved because my husband was traveling so much. And so everything was really my job in terms of the move.
But you've built community, like you've built community after years of kind of like weird pausing and limbo. You've built community, and then you move.
And then I move again to China. Now, the great part about having 4 years is that in Orlando, preparing to move, is that I was like ready. You know, we were just completely ready. I had it all. I was on WeChat, which is the way to communicate in China. I had been on it for a year, so I would already like knew some of the ins and outs that other families didn't. I'd already made some connections with their school, and I had my plan for, okay, we're going to be there 2 months, and then the kids start school, and then I have 3 hours because one kid was just in pre-K. Here are my goals. I'm going to write for Time Out Beijing Family. I'm going to write at least 1 article for Beijing Kids. I'm going to write this book for being a work at home parent. And I'm going to compile all the information I have on relocating with the family into some sort of good, workbook for other
Yeah.
people. And it was working.
Mm-hmm.
Like one of my, I think that a lot of what happened is that when you move overseas and you become an expat, you're either kind of in it or you're not, with like no judgment. Like some people are just in it because that's something they have to do for their career or their spouse's career, whatever. And some people are really in it for the adventure and this and that.
But that goes with everything, right? Like if you're fully in it, in the sense of you're truly immersed in it, like the same when you just travel instead of like actually moving there, if you immerse yourself in the culture versus you're just going there to relax or whatever and then go back and not really caring about. Or also like entrepreneurship, if you're really like, oh, okay, I'm letting myself fully into this adventure and explore and play and see what happens.
Yeah,
it's always like a completely different experience.
Yeah, and like everybody you meet there has like this common thread of we moved here, and even people that are from China usually had moved to Beijing from another area. And one of my best friends that I met right away turned out to be the editor for Time Out Beijing Family.
Oh, perfect.
So I did this thing same thing I did with theater, where I was pursuing, paying work, but I was also self-producing theater. And I did the same thing here, where I was pursuing other work, but I was also basically self-publishing on blogs, I was really active in the WeChat groups and tried to be helpful. And like, because I had done all this research, I was the again, trailing spouse, who like went on the company family WeChat group and said, okay, guys, I'm going to be at this park. Here's how you get here. I'll be here at this time at this entrance.
Yeah, like really proactively building the community.
And so and I also I wanted to do NaNoWriMo, which is National Novel Writing Month. You write a novel in November.
Okay.
And they didn't have an active community in Beijing. And through WeChat and some writing groups, I found someone who had run one before, and they and I started it. So I then got like this whole community of writers. And it was just it was such a really great time. And I wrote about being a work at home parent, a 4-part series for Time Out Beijing Family. I was like, I'd gotten a dream publication, which was for StarTrek.com.
So you were kind of like feeling like, oh, okay, I'm kind of through writing, I'm finding my voice again after like after turmoil of motherhood, moving like across the country, across the world.
And guess what? COVID.
And then COVID came and kind of like rained on your fucking parade.
Yeah. So we were there we moved there in July. And so in January, we were going to have a staycation, which ended up being trying to figure out whether we should leave or go during the Chinese New Year. And basically we thought we were like, the company said, okay, we will, if you want to leave, we will fly you. If you want to stay and work from home until we figure this out,
we'll support you.
Regardless, you're going to be working. But and so we flew back to LA because we thought we would be there for a couple weeks. And then the company realized that nobody had really gone back to Orlando. So before they knew it hit the United States, or before they admitted it, people were going into the office, but there weren't a lot of, anyway, we ended up moving back to Orlando, which I called like exile. Again, it was like a long layover. And then finally, the company was like, okay, it's about time. Beijing has figured it out. It's a lot of regulations, but we will fly you back. And
we can make this work in Beijing.
Great ideas. They had a charter flight. So They had HR people ready. It was set for April 3rd, and China closed its borders March 28th. And like, I can't even, I'm not even going to get it. Like, I was still writing, but like, this would have been the time that people needed someone who knew how to be a work at home parent. And I was like, I don't know what I'm doing right now. So I don't feel like I
Well,
can
in
help you.
fairness, no one knew what they were doing. Like during the first lockdown, it was a
Yeah.
complete novelty for everyone.
And we ended up, Dan could go back earlier because they would let employees, people with the work visas go back. And then the families got to go back. We went through quarantine, which wasn't fun, but like, it was fine. I ate a lot of snacks. We played a lot of video games because it was like me and my 2 kids. And
whatever, like in quarantine, whatever you got to do what you got to do. Like, no
I mean,
rules.
you like open
No
the door. If the door was open for too long while you were getting your food, an alarm went off. I mean, it was fine. We got back. And while we're in our like last week of quarantine, where we could go out, but we were like checking in on our temperature. I pitched Beijing Kids. I knew who the editor was on WeChat, and I pitched her because I had written a review for them before COVID, and I worked really hard on it. So I knew they liked my work. And I pitched her a story about what to do in quarantine with kids, because we were early. We got there before embassy people could even get back.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So there's still a lot of people going back to China and to Beijing.
Yeah. Like this was July. Some people didn't get back till October, November. And she was like, that sounds great. Also, we have a deputy editor position, so you should apply for that. And like, I had never met this person. I only knew her as a byline and that she was cool to work with once. And she had more experience than I did. Like, I mean, she had more belief in me to do this job than I did. But it was amazing. Like, I checked that me getting a work visa wouldn't affect our relocation with my husband's company at all. I was also super lucky because our IE, who's basically a babysitter or nanny, whatever you need, she was available, the same person we had used before COVID. That ended up being a mess, but we figured it out. But anyway, I knew that I had someone that could start, and they were totally fine with me starting part-time until school started. And like, this was my dream job. Like everything that was like in my head about moving, about parenting, about being
all these like gathered research, collected research, gathered information.
I had a place to put it besides like my WeChat groups, and it was just amazing. I mean, they were family first, right? Like they were always about family first. So if I had to leave early, I could. When we were transitioning between after school childcare, I just left at 3 and I picked up my kids at the bus, and then I worked from home. And like, you know, they were so clear on their deadlines that if I wasn't behind, there was no problem.
They would just leave you in peace, knowing it gets done, but don't really care about the how.
Right, exactly. And then it turned out that my Amina, who I adore, she's still one of my great friends, she was having a baby 2 months after I started. So I became acting editor for like 3 months, which was like a paper magazine. And like this, I usually have it here, but it's like a school choice guide, which takes the paper magazine from 50 pages to over 100, coordinating with all these international schools. And I mean, it was so hard. I was literally like working on my laptop during my kids' soccer games, or not soccer games, but like soccer practice, because like we had to put our WeChat posts out by a certain time. But like, I mean, my husband was like, "You're smiling more. Like, I know it's hard, but like you're so happy. You're like so
Mm,
much happier. So we got to do some free things because I was covering it or reviewing it, and I could take my kids to most of them, and like
mm,
it was honestly just like the best. Like
mm,
I absolutely would not have left if it weren't for us moving back
mm-hmm,
after a year.
mm-hmm.
And it was just so hard to leave that job and those people. And um you know, the last month that we were in Beijing, my husband was done. Like his contract was
Yeah,
done, and we were just
yeah,
waiting to move back. And so I could go out for drinks after work. I could hang out
yeah.
a lot more
It
than I
was a
could
completely different
before.
experience then again, right? Like because
Yeah. And so many other like people in my at my company were like, why haven't we, like, I stayed up until 3 a.m. with this woman from marketing, and like, and and she's like, how come we didn't do this? I'm like, yeah, I didn't have childcare.
well, it's life, right? Like
Yeah.
life.
Yeah. And but it was, that gave me so much confidence, and that gave me so much understanding of
Mm,
what I'm good at,
yeah,
and what my writing's like, and where I can be helpful, which is
yeah, yeah,
really, it
yeah,
was really like, I just I just want my nonfiction to be helpful.
yeah.
Um and yeah, so that was 2021 to last summer, 2020,
Mm.
sorry, 2020 to 2021. Um and we moved back to Orlando a year ago.
Yeah, and merry-go-round.
Yeah. And like when we first moved here, we thought we would be here for a few months, and then we moved to Osaka for a couple years, which, you know, sounded great. Um, and then his job changed again, and
Mm,
now we're here for 3 more years,
mm-hmm.
which in theme park world time is like 5 years. Um, but yeah, like, okay, repatriating to the United States when they're still not COVID conscious at all is like an entirely different podcast. Um,
Yeah, yeah, especially if you're moving from Beijing, who was
yeah,
very strict protocols and hygiene procedures.
like we'd had a normal life
Hmm.
with a mask, you
Yeah.
know, and so we started homeschooling, and we tried really hard. And my kids have been so great. They're like, oh, we'll try this. Great, blah, blah, blah. And
Hmm.
then they're like, and around October, they're like, I want to go to school.
Yeah, this is not really working.
And
Yeah.
I was trying to get better paying work, and I was, and then it wasn't working. It just,
Mm.
it was content marketing, which I can do,
Hmm.
but it just wasn't working. So they started in January. And uh, and after, you know, a bit more transition, because we bought a house, but it was in probate. And so
Mm.
we bought the house in February, but we didn't actually buy it until June.
Hmm.
Um, and we transitioned through that. And now they're in school full time. They started last week.
Ooh.
Yeah, we actually, and we like
Made it.
figured out. Yeah. And I'd been working because they were in summer camp. Like I felt so,
Yeah.
it was such a difference from the last time we were here, that like, you know, we could get them into summer camp. We're
Yeah.
we had,
What was the big difference? Like, I mean, obviously, summer camp is also like a financial component, but do you do you see, like, after this really positive experience in Beijing, and also like having someone believe in you, as you've said, even more than you did in your own capabilities, like, had that anything to do with how Orlando was different the second time around? or how
Yeah.
is different the second time around?
One thing is that my husband was like, listen, if we're gonna live here, I want to live here. I don't,
And not again like have this 4-year limbo of
yeah. And that's why
mm,
we decided to buy a house, and like actually one that we could see living in.
mm,
It was the most ridiculous time to buy a house, but it actually worked out.
all us. Yeah.
Yeah. My new office. And we were just really clear on like what was going to work for us. We started doing more outdoor activities like
Mm,
paddleboarding, which we had never
mm,
done. Learning how to sail. Um, and the biggest shift, the biggest change between when we first moved to Orlando and now, there were two. One is that my kids were not babies.
mm,
They had some friends here. We
mm.
had people we could like lock back into, even when
Yeah.
we were being, more careful because of COVID. We had friends that were still
Mm-hmm.
not in school for the same reasons,
Mm-hmm.
and there were homeschooling pods and stuff. So like I could lock into
Mm.
already existing
Yeah.
community. And my husband had gotten a promotion by then.
Mm.
So we could live pretty comfortably on a budget and still be able to get them into summer school,
Mm.
which is just like,
Yeah, which creates more time and capacity on your end, and so to really
yeah,
focus on. Yeah.
yeah. And even while we were moving and things were, ridiculous and everything, it was still, I didn't get all the time that we had in summer school because we were moving, but like
Mm.
I could still come up and like have a couple hours, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? Like sometimes that's all we need, right?
Mhm.
Not I don't know. I always think people have it way, I see it with my clients too. They have it way too black and white, right? Like you're like, oh, okay, I want to, I don't know, I have to uh, gain clarity, think clearly, blah 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 blah, and they imagine they're doing some kind of like eat, pray, love trip. But yeah, maybe you get to do that. Lucky you. But most of us, we're trying to do the eat, pray, love in between driving our kids to school and preparing lunch, right?
Mhm.
And that counts too. It's just harder to believe in because you maybe don't see instant big changes, and you need trust that all these small steps are building up and compounding,
Mhm.
and that's
Like
hard.
even when we were transitioning last spring and it was stressful because we didn't know when we were going to close on the
Mm-hmm.
house and everything. I had been in a mastermind since we moved to Beijing,
Mm-hmm.
a free mastermind with some really great people. And then I found one through that was all for freelance writers.
Mm-hmm.
And it was this great podcast, the Writers Co-op. And for 4 months, you just upped your Patreon pledge, and they did some really focused work. And I did that, and I had all my notes, and I had the kind of conclusion about where I wanted to go,
Yeah.
what I wanted to really do,
Mm-hmm.
but I couldn't really do it for a little while.
Mm-hmm.
And then, yeah, it took like just a few days, a couple weeks in the new house while they were at summer camp, and I had time to
Mm.
like let all that prep work sit with me.
Mm.
I had to drop writing for a local paper, which I wish I could have done, but it was more journalism, and it was not
Mm.
what I'm actually good at. So it took
Yeah.
so much time. Um, but now like they're in school, and most of the time they're in school all day. And even if I have work to finish after school, we have a really good system of like,
Mm.
if I tell them you can watch YouTube for half an hour, they'll go set a timer.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
And only
Yeah.
once in a while they'll complain about it.
Mm.
And I know that like I needed to take them out and our dog out to the park yesterday, but like it's August in Florida, it's really hot. And so we went out, but it was for an hour. It satisfied everybody's need to do something outside of school. And then we were home and we played together, and I got to finish work too. So
yeah, right. That's the thing. That's another thing, right? Like it's the good enough.
Yeah.
The good enough. Like focus on what moves the needle. What moves the needle enough. Just good enough parenting. That's what I practice.
Well, even like writing, you know,
good enough writing, good enough design. Like there is a space and time for like the 100% perfection, but most of the time,
and most of the time, enough. What you don't think is good enough is actually good enough.
Like, sure. I mean, you have if you feel like this is like good enough, it probably has been good enough 25% ago or something like that. Yeah, I like that. Like how really, I like how finding your voice is. I like what you've shared, right? Like to really do the prep work, like do the research, and then go immerse and roll with the punches, right? Because you can do all the prep in the world, right? Like, I mean, right? You have the stage play, you have the stage setting, you know what's gonna happen, and then something unexpected happens, and the show is going on, and you keep rolling with the punches, right? And it happens, and how finding your voice can happen in between all these things, and not in this. Once I have 3 months off to do the Eat, Pray, Love thing, I'll go do that. But it's actually happening right now. It's not paused.
Yeah, and I've been having a lot of trouble not being scatterbrained, like forgetting things, you know, all this stuff. And part of that is like just, you know, knowing certain things about my brain that I didn't know before and stuff like that. But so like I do some coaching too, like for first time authors, and I do college application coaching for international students, which is such a nice way to connect back to China. But like this woman I'm coaching now for her book, it's all about living a simpler life. And just editing that book, I am slowing down. Like,
nice.
You know, I can't do half of how she's suggesting a simpler life because of choices we made. Like our kids are going to separate schools, we still have to drive, blah blah. But like it took so long and to learn that it's okay to slow down. And part of this is because I still always have that mindset of like, well, if I'm not on Facebook, I'm going to miss someone putting out that call for pitches. That's perfect for me. But then a month later, there'll be another call that will be perfect.
Yeah. What is meant to be yours is going to find its way to you, right? Like, I mean, you had the perfect proof when you were not pitching in Beijing on WeChat, and through just community building, you proved your value, and it came to you. So that was
and I'm learning now how to like tap into that same idea in Orlando, where like there might be you know, Disney has said they're going to move here within a couple of years. Well, now I know a lot of people who are in the same position I was in 2015. Okay, here's a lot of information. Here's what you need to know about schools. Here's what I wish I know. And even the other day, like we renewed our kids' passports and we went to the library to do it. And it was so nice. It was so much nicer. And it was like, you know, I posted about that. People asked for more information. And I'm like, okay, here's a blog about it. Like, here's exactly what I did with links. And so just understanding that like that same helpful information and helpful writing I did in Beijing can still help people here. has really helped me and has really allowed me
Yeah.
to be like, I don't have to chase all of these other pitches because
Yes.
like
Yes.
out
Yes.
of these 50, these
Stop.
five,
Stop the chase. Yes.
yeah,
I
only
like
these
that.
five apply to me.
Yes.
You know,
I
like
love
the way
that.
we met, there are so many calls for guests, and I'm like, yeah, but only these two actually make sense for me.
Yeah, exactly. Like what's meant to be yours will find its way. I love that. Thank you so much for spending this episode, this part of the scenic route with me. I
Yeah, I
always have
love.
one lasted, sorry, I have always one lasted unscripted question.
Mhm.
Um, and this is especially interesting to you, I suppose, because you're writing, so you're a writer. What are you currently reading?
I'm
Now I
reading
want to know
two.
because I'm always looking for books that I love to read. So
I'm reading two things. One I'm reading is this book called Dark Skies,
ooh.
which is a really amazing book. And about traveling and about
Mhm,
being an American traveling, and it's like the combination of travel and exposure to other people and violence and
mhm,
America, and
mhm,
it's written in short spurts, which is great. But like what I
mhm.
love about it is that um, I'll send you the author's name and everything, but I love that like I will read it and I will go down into the depths of despair of, oh my God, the world is not going to survive, and we're so, and all of this stuff. And
Yeah,
then she says something about art and like a piece of art that
beauty.
made her,
Mm,
yeah. And I'm like,
yeah,
whoa, wait, there's a
yeah,
hope? What?
yeah,
It's,
yeah.
oh my God, it's so hard. I can only read it like at somewhere away
Hmm.
from anywhere else.
Yeah.
Um, but I also do like fantasy and romance book reviews for fun.
Okay. Yeah.
And what is the name of this one? I just started it and I love it. Um, it's a it's a it's a romance, and it's male on male romance. It's a little spicy. Or I think
Whoa.
it's gonna be spicy. I'm not sure if it's gonna be spicy or not, but it's
Okay, we
called
hope for
You Again.
spicy.
I
How's it
know.
called?
It's called You Again.
Oh, that's
And
also an interesting title.
yeah, and it I've read more than half of it right now, and it's just so engaging and so fun. And I started reading romance during COVID, and I'm like, oh, I get it. This is really fun, you know. Um,
Yeah, there's a time and place for romance or chick literature for sure.
yeah, yeah,
Yes,
and it's just I've been so enjoying it. And it's
I
not,
love it.
yeah. So I like to have like two different things depending on what I need
That's
to.
perfect. Yeah, me same. Whatever the moods. So, Anthony, how can people find you online? Where do you hang out?
I am on CindyMarieJenkins.com, just my full name. I'm usually between Twitter and Instagram. You can find me. I'm slightly different versions of my life on those, but both accounts are at Cindy Marie J. And those are the main places right now. I'm still on Facebook, but I can't handle it that
Yeah,
much.
same. Same. I don't. I delete the app from my phone, so I only check it like maybe once a week or once a month or something.
Mhm.
Like, and it's good. It's good. I like it.
Yep. Yep.
So you're also going to share something with our listeners, right? It's a checklist. Do you want to tell me more about it quickly?
Sure. So one of the last things I did for Beijing Kids before I left is worked on their home and relocation guide.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, when we were doling out the assignments, the editor was like, "Why don't you just do this part?" And I'm like, "Okay, I have my binders." Um, but I do have a checklist of what you need in your binder to relocate. But the first thing is a checklist of questions to ask if you're considering relocating your family for a job. And
Mm.
what to ask about where you're living, about what people will be doing, about how easy it will be to shift. You know, we're going to
Yeah,
ask if we relocate again, it'll be very different questions because our kids will be older.
of course. But
And
like to really have like, hey, this is kind of like a guide to get you through conversations and actually like not forgetting anything.
yeah,
It's gonna
and
be
my
really,
husband and I did a lot of these questions. And I know people who didn't, and I know people who did, and I really feel like the experience is very different.
mm, mm-hmm.
And it's not at all encompassing, but I really put some questions there that can apply to anybody in any position.
Yeah.
And it's everything from what are you going to do if you are saving money? You know,
Mm-hmm.
what are your goals with that? And what are you going to do if you're leaving a job to go when your spouse is only there for a job?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the checklist is available on my site, and it's also a downloadable
Perfect.
on there too.
Yeah. So if relocation is on your mind, definitely have a look. I'm sure. Like, yeah. So as far as I know, Cindy, you're the prep researcher. So that checklist will be amazing. No doubt about it.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, they had to change the font size in the magazine for my checklist.
As a designer, I would hate you so much. That's why
Oh
we
yeah.
don't like writers.
Yep.
Hey, listen, Cindy, it was such a pleasure talking to you. Thank
Yeah,
you
this is
so
so
much.
fun. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I hope to talk again.
Yeah, talk soon.